Over the last decade, cardiovascular research locked on to a new suspect circulating in our blood, a molecule called trimethylamine N-oxide, or TMAO. The suspicion solidified in 2013, following a landmark prospective study. Researchers tracked over 4,000 patients undergoing elective coronary angiography to see if levels of this molecule could predict future heart events. This chart illustrates cardiovascular risk distributed across 4 quartiles of TMAO levels. For the patients falling into that highest quartile, the data revealed a specific hazard. They faced an almost 2.5 times greater risk of death, heart attack, or stroke over 3 years, compared to those with the lowest levels. To the medical community, the implications seemed clear. These results framed TMAO as a measurable toxic driver of human heart disease. To understand why it was considered so dangerous, we have to track where it comes from. The process begins with our diet, specifically when we consume foods rich in carnitine and choline, like red meat and egg yolks. A fraction of those nutrients escapes early digestion and travels down to the cecum and colon. There, specific anaerobic bacteria cleave the compounds apart, releasing a volatile gas known as trimethylamine, or TMA. This anatomical flowchart maps the molecule's journey. Gut-derived TMA diffuses to the liver, where FMO3 oxidizes it into TMAO. Once flushed into the bloodstream, the original model posited a direct attack, suggesting circulating TMAO actively promotes foam cell formation and accelerates arterial plaque. With a dietary trigger, a mapped biological pathway, and a correlation with patient mortality, researchers concluded that TMAO was a primary causal mediator of atherosclerosis. But that clean biological narrative soon encountered a major obstacle straight from the ocean. Marine life provided the first real-world crack in the medical theory. Marine fish naturally accumulate enormous concentrations of preformed TMAO. They use the molecule as an osmolyte, a chemical shield that stabilizes their proteins against the crushing pressure and high salinity of the deep sea. Eating a red meat steak produces a modest, delayed rise in circulating TMAO, but eating a single meal of halibut or cod bypasses the microbial step entirely, and plasma TMAO soars exponentially higher, dwarfing the red meat response. This creates a stark paradox. If circulating TMAO is a lethal vascular toxin, populations that habitually eat heavy amounts of seafood should logically suffer from accelerated arterial disease and heart failure. The epidemiological reality shows the exact opposite. Fish and seafood consumption is consistently linked to a reduced risk of coronary heart disease, stroke, and sudden cardiac death. The cardioprotective nature of fish shatters the simple idea that higher TMAO automatically equals more heart attacks. The biological context is doing the heavy lifting, demanding a much deeper investigation into cause and effect. To separate correlation from true causation, researchers turned to large-scale Mendelian randomization. The premise relies on the genetic lottery. If TMAO actively causes arterial damage, people born with genetic variants that naturally produce high levels of it should logically suffer more cardiovascular events. When researchers parsed massive datasets like the UK Biobank, the results were clear. There was absolutely zero direct causal link between genetically predicted high TMAO and coronary artery disease, stroke, or myocardial infarction. Compare that null genetic result to the striking 2.5-fold risk we saw in the hospital angiography patients. The numbers from the observational cohorts simply do not align with the genetic reality. The genetics suggest TMAO isn't the primary attacker. If a lifetime of genetically elevated TMAO doesn't cause heart attacks, some other underlying disease process must be forcing the levels up in sick patients. To find that underlying disease process, we have to look away from the heart and focus on the body's primary filtration system, the kidneys. Under normal physiological conditions, systemic TMAO is cleared from the human body almost entirely by renal glomerular filtration. Because clearance relies heavily on this pathway, even mild reductions in kidney function severely impair the exit route. As glomerular filtration drops, TMAO inevitably pools in the blood, completely independent of what the patient is eating. The second culprit lives in the liver, specifically the FMO3 enzyme, which acts as the primary factory producing TMAO from gut-derived gases. In a healthy, insulin-sensitive body, insulin itself acts as a restrictive brake on FMO3 transcription, keeping the overall production of TMAO low. This functional schematic shows how that regulation works and how it fails. When obesity or metabolic syndrome causes hepatic insulin resistance, that healthy insulin block is removed. With the brake destroyed, liver FMO3 activity surges, and TMAO floods into the system. High circulating TMAO acts like crime scene tape. It isn't holding the weapon. Rather, it's pointing to the true systemic culprits of failing kidney clearance and hepatic insulin resistance. The scientific consensus has shifted significantly. At normal physiological levels, TMAO is now viewed as a passenger rather than an active driver of atherosclerotic disease. Its modern utility lies in its sensitivity. It is a highly effective systemic reporter molecule that reflects the combined, integrated health of our diet, our gut microbiome, our liver, and our kidneys. However, the research carves out one critical medical exception to the passenger rule, and that is in the context of advanced chronic kidney disease. This graph plots TMAO concentration across declining kidney health. In severe disease, clearance plummets and TMAO pools astronomically. Here, it crosses a threshold, transitioning from a passive marker into an active toxin that drives further kidney scarring. Biological context dictates the threat. TMAO's potential for harm depends almost entirely on the underlying structural health and filtration capacity of the patient's kidneys. So where does this leave patients and doctors who are looking at a blood test result with high TMAO today? Measuring TMAO remains a diagnostic tool that flags metabolic and renal dysfunctions, often missed by standard cholesterol, glycemic, or inflammatory panels. Because of its prognostic value, there is an ongoing pharmaceutical hunt for a chemical inhibitor, a pill to specifically block the production of TMAO. But targeting the molecule directly is a lot like trying to silence a shrieking alarm. If a fire alarm is going off because your house is burning down, climbing up to the ceiling to take the batteries out of the alarm will not save you from the fire. True disease prevention requires addressing what triggered the alarm in the first place. The focus must remain on fixing the root causes: diet quality, physical activity, insulin sensitivity, and kidney health, rather than trying to hack the biomarker.